Good morning. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Library. Today we're going to read John Henry. This is a pretty cool folktale legend set way back in 1870. As the workers were building the railroad, they would sing this song about John Henry. So it's kind of not completely sure that it's really about one person in general or all of them working together. But one thing is sure, if you want to pause this and read everything you can, that one thing is certain that in between 1870 and 1873, the Big Bend Tunnel of the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad was built in the Allegheny Mountains in Summers County, West Virginia. And I Googled the Big Bend Tunnel, and you can find it. And it's actually decommissioned now, and there's a statue of John Henry there. But there's a lot of little clues in this that tell you that it is pretty much a folk tale and an awesome little story. You have probably never heard of John Henry, or maybe you heard about him, but you don't know the ins and outs of his comings and goings. Well, that's why I'm going to tell you about him. When John Henry was born, birds came from everywhere to see him. The bears and the panthers and moose and deer and rabbits and squirrels and even a unicorn came out of the woods to see him. And instead of the sun tending to its business and going to bed, it was peeping out behind the moon's skirts trying to get a glimpse of the baby himself. Look at that strong baby. Before long, the mama and papa came out on the porch to show off their brand new baby. The birds oohed and the animals awed at how handsome the baby was. Somewhere in the middle of one of those oohs, or maybe it was on the backside of one of those ahs, that baby jumped out of his mama's arms and started growling. He growled and he growled and he grew and he grew and he grew until his head and shoulders busted through the roof, which was over the porch. John Henry thought that was the funniest thing in the world, and he laughed so loud the sun got scared. It scurried from behind the moon's skirts and went to bed, which is where it should have been all the while. Let's see if I can get that reflection off. There we go. The next morning, John Henry was up at sunrise. The sun wasn't. He was tired and had decided to sleep in. John Henry wasn't going to have none of that. He hollered up in the sky, "Get up from there. I got things to do and I need light to do 'em by." The sun yawned, washed its face, flossed, brushed its teeth, and hurried up over the horizon. That day, John Henry helped his papa rebuild the porch he had busted through, added a wing onto the house with an indoor pool and one of them jacuzzis. After lunch, he chopped down an acre of trees and split them into fireplace logs and still had time for a nap before dinner. The next day, John Henry went to town. He met up with the meanest man in the state, ferret-faced Freddie, sitting on his big white horse. You know what he was doing? He was thinking of mean things to do. Ferret-faced Freddie was so mean he cried if he had a nice thought. John Henry said, "Freddie, I'll make you a bet. Let's have a race. You and your horse and me on my legs. If you and your horse win, you can work me as hard as you want for a whole year. If I win, you have to be nice for a year." Ferret-faced Freddie laughed an evil laugh. "It's a deal, John Henry." His voice sounded like bat wings on tombstone. The next morning, folks lined up all along the way the race would go. John Henry was ready. Ferret-faced Freddie and his horse were ready. Bang! The race was on. My great-granddaddy's brother's cousin, sister-in-law's uncle's aunt was there that morning. She said everybody saw Ferret-faced Freddie ride on his big white horse, and they were sure enough moving. Didn't nobody see John Henry? That's because he was so fast the wind was out of breath trying to keep up with him. When Ferret-faced Freddie crossed the finish line, John Henry was already on the other side, sitting in a rocking chair drinking a soda mom. After that, Ferret-faced Freddie was so nice everyone called him Frederick the Friendly. Get this reflection off there today. What's going on? John Henry decided it was time for him to go on down the road. He went home and told his mama and daddy goodbye. His daddy said, "You got to have something to make your way in the world, son. These belong to your granddaddy," and he gave him two 20-pound sledgehammers with 4-foot handles made of whalebone. A day or so later, John Henry saw a crew building a road. At least that's what they were doing until they came upon a boulder right smack dab where the road was supposed to go. This was no ordinary boulder. It was as hard as anger and as big around. It took half a week for a tall man to walk from one side to the other. John Henry offered to lend them a hand. "That's all right. We'll put some dynamite to it." John Henry smiled to himself. "Whatever you say." The road crew planted dynamite all around the rock and set it off. Kerboom! Blamity! Blamity! Boom! Boom! Bang! Boom! Bang! That dynamite made such a racket, the Almighty looked over the parapets of heaven and hollered, "It's getting too noisy down there." The dynamite kicked up so much dirt and dust it got dark. The moon thought night had caught her napping, and she hurried out so fast she almost bumped into the sun, who was still climbing the steep hill towards noontime. When all the commotion from the dynamite was over, the road crew was amazed. The boulder was still there. In fact, the dynamite hadn't knocked even a chip off of it. The crew didn't know what to do now. Then they heard a rumbling noise. They looked around. It was John Henry laughing. He said, "If you gentlemen would give me a little room, I got some work to do." "Don't see how you can do what dynamite couldn't," said the boss of the crew. John Henry chuckled. "Just watch me." He swung one of his hammers around and around his head. It made such a wind that leaves blew off the trees and birds fell out of the sky. Ring! The hammer hit the boulder. That boulder shivered like you do on a cold winter morning when it looks like the school bus is never going to come. Ring! The boulder shivered like the morning when freedom came to the slaves. John Henry picked up his other hammer. He swung one hammer in a circle over his head. As soon as it hit the rock, ring! The hammer in his left hand started to make a circle, and ring! Soon ring from one hammer followed the ring from the other one so closely it sounded like they were falling at the same time. Ring, 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 ring. Chips and dust were flying from the boulders so fast that John Henry vanished from sight. But you could still hear his hammers ring, ring. The air seemed to be dancing to the rhythm of the hammers. The boss of the road crew looked up. His mouth dropped open. He pointed to the sky. There, in the air above the boulder, was a rainbow. John Henry was swinging them hammers so fast he was making a rainbow around his shoulders. It was shining and shimmering in the dust and grit like hope that never dies. John Henry started singing. "I got a rainbow, ring, ring, tied around my shoulder, ring, ring. Ain't gonna rain, no, it ain't gonna rain, ring, ring." John Henry sang and he hammered, and the air danced and the rainbow shimmered, and the earth shook and rolled, and the blow of the hammer, finally, it was quiet. Slowly the dust cleared. Folks could not believe their eyes. The boulder was gone. In its place was the prettiest and straightest road they had ever seen. Not only had John Henry pulverized the boulder into pebbles, he had finished building the road. In the distance, where the new road connected to the main one, the road crew saw John Henry waving goodbye, a hammer on each shoulder, the rainbow draped around him like love. John Henry went on his way. He had heard that any good man with a hammer could find work building the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad that went through West Virginia. That was where he had been going when he got stopped to build the road. The next day, John Henry arrived at the railroad. However, work had stopped. The railroad tracks had to go through the mountain. And such a mountain. Next to it, even John Henry felt small. But a worker told John Henry about a new machine that they were going to use to tunnel through the mountain. It was called the steam drill. It can hammer faster and harder than 10 men, and it never has to stop to rest. The next day, the boss arrived with the steam drill. John Henry said to him, "Let's have a contest. Your steam drill against me and my hammers." The man laughed. "I've heard you're the best there ever was, John Henry. But even you can't outhammer a machine." "Let's find out," John Henry answered. Boss shrugged. "Don't make me no, never mind. You start on the other side of the mountain. I'll start the steam drill over here. Whoever gets to the middle first is the winner." The next morning, all was still. The birds weren't singing. The roosters weren't crowing. When the son didn't hear the roosters, he wondered if something was wrong, so he rose a couple minutes early to see. What he saw was a mountain as big as her feelings. One side was big machine hooked to a hose. It was belching smoke and steam. As the machine attacked the mountain, rocks and dirt and underbrush flew into the air. On the other side was John Henry. Next to the mountain, he didn't look much bigger than a wish that wasn't going to come true. He had a 20-pound hammer in each hand and muscles hard as wisdom in each arm. As he swung them through the air, they shone like silver, and when the hammers hit the rock, they rang like gold. Before long, tongues of fire leapt out from beneath the blows. There's the steam drill. And here's John Henry on this side of the mountain. On the other side, the boss in the steam drill felt the mountain shudder. He got scared and hollered, "I believe this mountain is caving in." From the darkness inside the mountain came a deep voice. "It's just my hammer sucking wind. It's just my hammer sucking wind." There wasn't enough room inside the tunnel for the rainbow, so it wrapped itself around the mountain on the side where John Henry was. All through the night, John Henry and the steam drill went at it. In the light from the tongues of fire shooting out the tunnel, from John Henry's hammer blows, folks could see the rainbow wrapped around the mountain like a shawl. The sun came up extra early the next morning to see who was winning. Just as it did, John Henry broke through and met the steam drill. The boss of the steam drill was flabbergasted. John Henry had come 1.25 miles. The steam drill had only come a quarter. There's a fun word, flabbergasted. That's a lot of surprise right there. Folks were cheering and yelling, "John Henry! John Henry!" John Henry walked out of the tunnel into the sunlight, raised his arms over his head, a hammer in each hand. The rainbow slid off the mountain and around his shoulders. With a smile, John Henry closed his eyes and he slowly fell to the ground. John Henry was dead. He had hammered so hard and so fast and so long that his big heart had burst. Everybody was silent for a minute. Then came the sound of soft crying. Some said it came from the moon. Another one said he saw the sun shed a tear. Then something strange happened. Afterwards, folks swore the rainbow whispered it. I don't know, but whether it was a whisper or a thought, everyone had it at the same moment. Dying ain't important. Everybody does that. What matters is how well you do your living. First, one person started clapping, then another and another. Soon everybody was clapping. The next morning, the sun got everybody up early to say goodbye to John Henry. They put him on a flatbed railroad car, and the train made its way slowly out of the mountains. All along the way, folks lined both sides of the track, and they were cheering and shouting through their tears, "John Henry! John Henry!" John Henry's body was taken to Washington, D.C. Some say he was buried on the White House lawn late one night while the president and the Mrs. President was asleep. I don't know about none of that, What I do know is this: if you walk by the White House late at night, stand real still and listen real closely. Folks say you just might hear a deep voice singing, I got a rainbow ring, ring, tied around my shoulders, ring, ring. It ain't gonna rain, no, it ain't gonna rain, ring, ring. The end. All right, now that we've finished John Henry, what lesson can you learn from it? Because folk tales always teach us lessons. So I think it pretty much said it towards the end of the book. Also, if you look up John Henry, there is a Disney short movie about him too.